Looks like I'm not visible. Okay, let me try again. Good afternoon, everyone. Live from Silicon Valley, California. This is Success Sadhana. My name is JM, and I welcome you all to a program today where we'll discuss another topic, the happiness equation, decoding the formula of true contentment. With our speaker today, Vaish, a veteran Bhakti yogi, author, and former monk. Thanks everyone for joining. I know people are still dialing in, and I do see that my camera it's not cooperating. It may take a minute or so, but welcome back, Vaish. Thank you. Glad to have you in our program today.
Thank you so much, JM. Glad to see you, and good to see all of you, Diti, Charles, Jason. Thanks for joining. Noel, Rajesh, Ratika, Arvind, and Meena. Shri Krishnamurti, more coming in. Charles, this is a similar topic, something we did on Monday, but it's got nuance and there was a lot more to discuss. And it is a perennial topic, isn't it? Happiness. What is it? Do we just take for granted that it comes of its own accord, or is it from our own endeavors? Are there different qualities of happiness? And what might we be mistaking as happiness that actually leads to misery? Those are some of the questions we'll answer today. And it's spurred on by wisdom literatures like the Bhagavad Gita that recommend that we look into the consequences of everything that we do and find a map, get guidance for which way we're moving in our life. That's commonsensical. Plan things out. And if you want to be healthy, you really have to have a plan for it. And if you want to be wealthy, you got to have a plan. It just doesn't happen well, it could happen by accident, but you'll lose it all if you don't have a plan to hold on to it. And as Jim Rohn used to say, if you can't, then you better get a can plan. So the Bhagavad Gita and the wisdom literatures are very practical. We have a great opportunity in the human form of life. It's sometimes described as a portal or a loophole. That's even more exciting, isn't it? If you've ever found a legitimate legal loophole when it comes to finances or so, then you feel, oh, I'm privileged. But the idea behind the human apparatus is that it is a loophole. It's an opportunity to rise above the normal impulses that we think lead to happiness and to develop, which takes practice, a higher connection, a higher way of doing things. Just a reminder, something I read over the last few days. I get this quotation from James Clear, the one who wrote Atomic Habits. And he gave some very helpful guidance, I think. And I'm going to share it with you now. Is that okay? I need a quorum. You can use an emoji or you can say, okay. That's not a quorum yet.
Go for it.
Well, we're getting there. We're building towards a quorum. Thank you, Ratika. Thank you, Shri Krishnamurti. He said, remember that everything we do is a practice. And so what are you practicing? And you can look and see, what are you doing throughout the day? Where am I putting my attention? How am I engaging my senses? There'll be muscle memory for everything that we do. Everything we do is a kind of practice. And this is consistent with the idea of the Bhagavad Gita. This human form that we have is an opportunity to express our free will. But if we're not fully informed about what's good for us, what isn't, then we may take the path to unhappiness to be happiness, and it can be attractive at first, but then it can end up in a place where we're not happy. That's explained in the Bhagavad Gita as well. So I'll just do some compare and contrast, and today I'm going to use a very, very, very simple formula for happiness, because Occam's razor states the simplest solution is usually the best, the one that has the fewest assumptions or moving parts. But first, one of the ways that we can enter into this most fruitfully is to start with a little introspection, some meditation. So let's start off with, I'll do a short meditation based on breathing exercise, just to slow the mind down, bring us more into a state of concentration. And I'm going to treat us all to a drone in C major. And if you feel like it, you can try sitting up slightly straighter than you were a second ago, and then just close your eyes. Free eyelids thrown in with every human body. Give you an opportunity to tune out at least the visual aspects of the world. And practice slowing your breath down and regulating the breath by getting a 5 count on the exhalation and a 5 count on the inhalation, and just notice your capacity. Don't strain, natural breath, but count to 5 on the way out and on the way in. Get comfortable and relax, but keep an alert mind. And use your breath as a focal point to just notice that you can bring your awareness to any point in the body. Right now it's the breath, according to your choice. Where attention goes, energy flows. We always have a choice of where we place our attention. And relax, but with an alert mind, notice any thought energy and just be the witness of it. For now, don't worry about solving any problem. If you feel an emotion, just notice it, appreciate it, and for now, let it go. And stay in the aloof position of being the witness of everything that's going on. And keep your breath even. And then bring your attention to your heart center. Within the heart, there are nerve endings. We feel with our heart. Let's feel some gratitude. And as you inhale, focus your breath on your heart, and as you exhale, focus your breath on your whole body. And watch your breath. And ask yourself, who's watching my breath? And you can answer, I am. And notice that you're conscious. You're an individual. And notice your own consciousness and your own conscious awareness. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that when one is able to perform pratyahara, that is, withdraw from the external sense objects, and also from the internal allurement of the thoughts that come through one's mind, And when one's able to find joy within the self, that is, I exist. I'm here right now. I've always been here. This is the platform of fixed consciousness and the beginning of happiness or satisfaction, tushta. And take a few breaths, noticing that you're the witness. Take a moment to wiggle your fingers and toes. Rub your hands together, bring some external sensation, and just notice you can transfer your awareness from your internal environment to your external environment and open your eyes and come back into the room. Welcome back. Now, everyone, I'll show a couple slides to start a discussion, and I'll be basing my theories on the Bhagavad Gita's proclamation that selfless service leads to a happy heart, whereas selfishness leads to an unhappy heart. This is an equation. If we keep that in mind, we can experiment with it and find out if it's true for us. Selfless service leads to a happy heart. Selfishness leads to an unhappy heart. Actually, that sign equals doesn't mean leads to. It should be an arrow pointing one leads to the next, but I couldn't find an arrow on my keyboard. So somebody can help me with that later. What do you think of the equation, just to start with? Do you have any reaction? Oh, Vaish, it's too simple. I've heard this before. What have you to say? Charles is leaning in. Tell us what you think, Charles.
I'm leaning in. Someone told a joke once. I think it's Sheryl Sandberg. She has that book Lean In, and I think Cornel West. He said, "I want you to be all in." But so yeah, I'm all in. But yeah, I think it makes sense, and I think there's nothing wrong with simple. I think simple is good. And it also makes it, I think, a little easier for us to understand too, and to apply. But I think I've seen it in my life. I was thinking back to an experience yesterday. And yeah, it was a situation where I was able to give to the people around me. And sorry about that pinging noise. But it was a situation where I was able to give to the people around me. I went out to dinner with some friends and ended up just picking up the tab naturally. And I felt good about there's something it wasn't like oh I paid and this but it felt I would have felt worse saying oh no send me this amount and chopping it up and it's okay and I feel it was the right action and I could feel that and I think that was more selfless than selfish.
Thank you very much. Yeah, first of all, about your point of it being simple, it's helpful because life seems oftentimes complex, and to have an equation that we can apply, a formula that's simple, doesn't seem so complicated, and we can flip the switch and see how it feels and then notice it like you're doing, can lead us to a philosophy we can follow in life. Radhika. Do you say
There we go.
Radhika or
Can you
Ratika?
hear me?
Yes,
Ratika.
Ratika. Okay.
I like the first part. 100% agree. In the giving is the getting, and that's when I do feel happy is when I'm being selfless and helping others, serving others. The second part of the equation, I'm dying to hear more about, because in my experience, when my heart is unhappy, oftentimes I think it's because somebody else is being selfish. And so when I read it, I was like, okay, then how can I look at it? Where am maybe I being selfish that it is leading to my unhappy heart? And I'm glad this is being recorded, because I'm driving and I'll have to get off in about 12 minutes. But so far, so good. I like the first half, and I'm very curious about the second half.
What an excellent question, and thank you for bringing up the nuance in this. And although I'm giving a simple equation, there are nuances, and they're important to discuss. The philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita, which I claimed I would stick to in order to have an axiomatic base to the conversation, is that it's important to understand terms. And when I say self, there are various definitions for that in the wisdom literatures. In Sanskrit, in which many of these literatures are written, the word self is called Atma. And I was once playing a game at a grammar school where I was asked to speak in Hawaii. It was one of my first experiences of talking to kids about yoga and self-realization. And I must admit, I totally blew it. And then the person who was much more experienced that was there, he said, look, I'll show you how to do this. And in the next class, he played this game called Simon Says. And it got all the way to the end when one kid had won. Hopefully everybody knows how to play that game, Simon Says. I don't want to describe all the details of it. It was a game of elimination. And then the presenter, who was a colleague of mine, said, okay, now Simon Says, point to yourself. And the kid looked around and he wasn't sure what he meant by that. And the other kids started laughing. And that's when he started making these points on the blackboard of it's important to pinpoint who you really are. So in the wisdom literatures, there's this idea of selfhood. There's definitely the concept that we are a self. There's some ideas that actually we don't really exist. These are untenable because when we look at the sun, we know it's there. When we look at ourselves, I think, therefore I am kind of realm, we understand we're alive, we exist, we're not nothing. And the Bhagavad Gita continues by saying we're always that self. But there are ways in which we can look at the self as the body. So Atma can mean body, can be mind, and it can also mean our us, the conscious self within. And when we identify with the body as the self, there's this strange phenomena that takes place where we feel an anxiety because the body's always changing. And which self am I? Am I the self when I'm just a little toddler? Or am I the self body when I'm an adolescent? Or how about when I'm middle age, or what to speak of old age? The body goes through all these changes. And when I identify with the self as the body, then I'm a little, not a little, but a lot off kilter. And so the idea of selfishness depends on how you define yourself and the context in which I'm using the phrase selfish is when I think that I am my body. And we did this exercise earlier to be the witness of the body. And if you can objectify the body, you can understand that you're not your body. You're the one watching it. So who are you? That's the self we're talking about. However, when we extend ourselves into the body and we say, I want everything to satisfy my senses, which is what the body's made of, this is the kind of selfishness that I'll make the case for, and which you'll hear in the recording, Ratika, later, that leads to a sense of dissatisfaction, or I could say unhappiness, because you can never fully satisfy the senses. Whereas when we have a sense of our true self, which is beyond the body, we get this tushta, or immediate satisfaction, which is based on the fact that we are superior energy. we're superior to the energy of the body. The body, our hair, our nails, our skin, these things are sloughing off all the time or breaking off and entering back into the total reservoir of elements. But we, on the other hand, are not. So the selfishness of trying to satisfy our external senses and our body and identifying with it is the definition that I'm going with as far as selfishness goes. And one of the statements in the wisdom literature is the more you try to satisfy the body or the mind with external objects, then the more misery you feel. And that can be borne out through various experiments that we may perform. So that's to give a little context. Radhakripa.
Yep, I just wanted to share just to Charles' point. In my recent India trip, I was traveling in a train, and train has a brief stop. But somehow I noticed that a girl who was carrying little extra luggage, she was kind of about to miss deboarding in the from the train. And then somehow I stood up. I just thought to help her out. And the moment I just did that job, she deboarded the train, and immediately train started running. And the impression on her face about the gratitude, without she utter a single word, was so priceless. I just felt, a little act. I don't know why it happened, because I thought she's going to miss it. But I still remember her face. She's like as if, she has a tons of gratitude in her heart about, otherwise she would have missed the, brief stoppage. So I know it's a little selfless work, whatever happened, but the impression which I got back, I think is a million times more my act, which I did it. So just
Yes, thank you very much, Radhakripa. These are the kind of experiments they're beginning experiments in the science of selflessness and service and so forth. It's on these very incidental ways in which we may enact a sense of selfless service, that urge, and we help. Then we start to see, oh, there's an opening here. And the idea behind Bhakti Yoga is that your whole life can turn in that direction. What must that feel like if everything you do is oriented towards a higher principle, that of service? Okay, Ravi.
Thank you, Guruji. So I have a little bit tougher, challenging question for you here. So I was kind of a selfless, by nature, but during my my professional, one of my boss gave me one-on-one a coaching. He said to me, "You are selfless, but this doesn't work in corporate. You have to be selfish. You have to see for everything you do or whatever you are, any action, you need to see what is there for me. You need to be more selfish to be successful." It was a direct coaching for me. I mean, so how do I change this equation in the situation in the corporate? Be selfish, because it was a direct coaching. If I don't be that, I mean, I'm violating his role. Or, I mean, he directly gave me a direct feedback to me. In that situation, I can't go, hey, this is my equation. Or how do I work in that? I mean, probably
Yeah,
just.
so it's a good question. It's very practical, Ravi. Thank you very
Yeah.
much for asking it. I'm sure a lot of people would like to ask that question. The answer is that they're not mutually exclusive. Doing your due diligence and making sure that you're working to your capacity, doing everything you need to do to survive in the world, that is, do your job dutifully, make sure nobody bullies you, make sure nobody is unjust. For instance, if somebody unjustly takes your property, it doesn't mean the concept of being selfless service, rendering selfless service doesn't mean, oh yeah, let everybody violate me and I'll just sit by passively. That's not what it means. That's why I say it's not mutually exclusive. One must do one's duty dutifully. If you're in the corporate environment, however, I know for sure that there's a sense, even from the top of the big corporations, that's why they invite people like us to come there and speak all the time. I'm going there on Tuesday to give a presentation, and there's open invitation from so many of these corporations to come and hear wisdom that talks about higher values like gratitude, like selflessness. because what corporations have come to realize is that people cannot survive just by the rough and tumble of competition that let us compete and then the best person wins and then there's a kind of social Darwinism. People become fatigued by that and they also don't do as well. And the research, social research, is showing that people who have high-minded values can be more productive if you do your due diligence and you also have this sense of selflessness, like some of the corporations do. Like even Mark Benioff has this way of giving away a lot of what he earns from the corporation. How's that working out? Fine. And what about other corporations like Tata? They give away just by their bylaws half of what they earn. I know a person very well who's a very successful entrepreneur, lives in Singapore, but he commutes to Silicon Valley. He gives seminars on this. And the last one I attended, just to observe, he was advocating for this idea that when you work for service, not only do you feel more satisfied, but he actually produced evidence, statistical evidence, that people do better financially, which is counterintuitive. And it also goes to the idea of, even in the realm of fundraising, people who give tend to be able to give more because they realize more capacity. By giving, you do grow, and you can prove it on paper. And it's not just an amorphous idea, sentimental idea, or something like that. So that's not mutual exclusive. You can protect your interests, which you should do because you have to be able to work and earn a living, and you should do the best you can. And if there's some sense of somebody violating your space, you have to protect yourself. That's proven in the Bhagavad Gita because it takes place on a battlefield after all. And the advocate for the war is Krishna, who's saying you have to fight because you're being violated. The whole gang that started to try to usurp the righteous people, then he was saying, no, you have to stand up against them. So he never advocated not protecting yourself, if that helps.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
Thank you, Ravi, for asking. Very helpful. Looks like we have something on the chat box, and then we'll take those and then go into the slides because time is slipping by fast here.
Yeah, Rajiv, welcome back, Rajiv. Rajiv says, like teamwork.
Yes.
And then Braila says, just a comment, not to interrupt discussion. This reminds me of a clip of Prabhupada in a Q&A. In the film Acharya, someone asked him about the energy of God, and he referenced the soul and the body as a part of energy of God in another form.
Nice. Very helpful. Thank you.
Rajesh Singh says, selfless selfishness.
Yes,
It helps
and
your
that's
team.
possible. There's nothing wrong with selfishness as long as you got the right definition of self. And when you do, see, the idea is the self doesn't need to encroach upon others because one who knows that the actual self is complete and satisfied. And if you're working with those who are selfish because they've taken care of their real self, in other words, they're practicing spiritually, so they're aware of the fact, oh, I'm not my body, neither are others, and there's a higher purpose to life. Wouldn't they be more effective in the way they do their corporate duties? Would you rather work with somebody who's cutthroat because they want something from themselves, or who's highly efficient because they understand that there's an unlimited resource of there are not limited resources in this world, and they come to us naturally when we give. By giving, we grow. Okay, let's go to the slides. Everyone okay so far? I don't know if we had a quorum on that, but.
Yes, it's very good. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Okay, there's our equation. Let's look at the next slide and we'll go to make some observations. Here's one of the advertisements for Coca-Cola. One of the ways that Bhagavad Gita helps us to understand happiness is to look at ephemeral happiness. Ephemeral means that which comes and goes. And although this looks promising and seems like a good idea, I mean, who wouldn't want to open a bottle of happiness, right? But if we actually analyze it, which is what the Bhagavad Gita says to do, so look at it carefully. Does it really is a good question to ask here. Is it really a bottle of happiness? It's a glass bottle. It's got a logo on it that we recognize because we've been bombarded with it for as long as any of us have lived, probably. And then the audaciousness of saying open happiness, open happiness, open happiness. What does it mean? Well, in this case, it's a promise that cannot really be fulfilled by the bottle itself. There must be something beyond that. And that's what they're aiming for psychologically, is to say everything that's associated with drinking a Coca-Cola, friendship, running on the beach, all the pictures they show us. If they were to superimpose somebody with rotten teeth and not allegedly, you get rotten teeth from drinking Coca-Cola, allegedly, or somebody with diabetes or something like that, we might then see the other side of it. Is it really happiness? And what if you open a bottle of Coca-Cola and you leave it out overnight? Does it still bring you that effervescent stimulation? In fact, it's been proven that the only reason people like these kind of drinks is because it has fizz in it. But is fizz really happiness? It's just a temporary stimulation of the senses. Let's look at the next one. These types of presentations are ubiquitous. Why are they ubiquitous? Because everyone knows that what everyone's looking for from trying anything, whether it's PCV pipe or Ghirardelli chocolate or Coca-Cola, is they want to feel satisfied. And what to speak of feeling happy. So look at the promise here, moments of timeless pleasure. And my comment above is, are you sure about this? And that's what the Bhagavad Gita asks us to ask. Are you sure about this? Or do you just react to it? And there is a way in which I might, in a state of blind acceptance, I might just walk in the store there and buy a whole pile of chocolate and see if I could get timeless pleasure out of it. I don't know if I would describe it as timeless pleasure because, first of all, I'd feel guilty eating it. Second of all, it spiked my blood sugar. Who knows what else? And then, if I get on the scale in a week, I might have gained a few pounds and say, oh no, what did I do? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there are implications to the kind of happiness we get from our interaction with the senses and their objects in this world. That's an important thing to understand. It's not really timeless pleasure. It's time-bound pleasure. It has a beginning and an end. That's called antavanta. It has a beginning and an end, and therefore, the standard of those who have tasted this atmatushta, or happiness that comes from the self, is that this is not really happiness. Food is a sense of temporary happiness. We need it. We have to be dutiful in what we eat and so forth. We can even make it into a sacrament, eating food, if we offer the food as out of gratitude back to the Supreme and say, thank you for eating this. And it can elevate our consciousness. But in and of itself, it's not really pleasure. If you have a different opinion about these products or those like them that claim to be happiness, I'd love to hear it. Okay, let's see the next slide. And it happens to be a movie. And here we go. Because I want you to just watch this movie and then comment on it in the context of, does giving make us grow?
Oh boy, is getting a lot of attention for what he did at the Phillies game last night.
Well, now we know who he is. Alicia Roberts is at Citizens Bank Park in South Philadelphia with more on this act of kindness. We love this story, Alicia.
Love this story indeed. Yuki, Jessica, you know it. Philly fans notoriously get a bad reputation in the sports world. So today we set out to find the two youngsters whose heartwarming story may change that. It's the touching moment from Wednesday night's Phillies game that has the whole city buzzing.
How about this? This foul ball is in the stands.
A foul ball is hit down the third base line where 10-year-old Aaron Presley is sitting with his father.
I'm following the ball, and I see it hit the ground, so I went to go grab it, and it was just exciting.
Aaron, a huge Philly sports fan, is celebrating his souvenir when he notices the young girl sitting next to him.
I look over and I see the girl, she's crying.
That pint-sized fan is 7-year-old Emma Brady.
A guy, he catched a ball, and I tried to get it, but he was too quick.
There's a little girl that dove for it.
I cried because I fell on my leg.
That's when this happened.
He came up to me and gave it to me.
Aaron hands his baseball to Emma.
And I was just like, it just didn't feel right having the ball knowing that somebody's crying, so I had to just give it to her.
Emma's dad describing the kind moment.
And he came right over without hesitation. He saw her for a moment, and without even thinking, he just turned and handed her the ball. It was the sweetest thing.
She was just so polite. She said thank you, and we had to just take a picture together.
And while Aaron may not have gone home with the game ball, he says the experience taught him 2 lessons he hopes every Phillies fan will remember.
Be nice to people, because not a lot of people in this world are nice.
And just in case,
I'll probably remember to bring my glove this time.
bring his glove next time. That's the second lesson there. By the way, we found out the Phillies found Aaron. They gave him a game ball, so he didn't go home empty-handed. Emma's family also gave Aaron a gift card to use at his next Phillies game. Aaron says he can't wait to come back to the ballpark. Reporting live in South Philly.
Obviously, a thought experiment about even the most spontaneous, elemental, or seemingly mundane instances in which a gift is given. And I noted when I first saw this that Aaron Presley spontaneously felt that he should give the ball. He wasn't forced to. Nobody asked him to. That's why he's suddenly famous in Philadelphia. What a simple act. It's just moving the hand this much, but it became a noteworthy story for many, and it's described in this narration of the story by these reporters. They called it heartwarming and touching. What is that heartwarming that comes from a kid handing over the ball? It was a selfless act. It was perceived as a selfless act. So there's lessons to learn from that. What lesson did Aaron learn? He said, I learned that I should be nice. That's a concept that's metaphysical. Otherwise, if we just are products of material elements and everything's about survival, there's no logic to giving something like that. That wouldn't apparently help your survival. What's in it for you? And so this idea of being nice or being charitable, giving, is one of the premises of this philosophy of bhakti yoga. What if you start directing all your energy in that way, that you become a giver? And this is a concept called yajna, that you see the world as a place for giving. It's good work if you can get it. And it requires flipping the switch. And I also want to make one other note. Even though he gave the ball away, they gave him a new one, another game ball. Plus, they gave him a gift card. Now, this is something that my friend, who's the entrepreneur from Singapore, had mentioned to these wealthy people he was talking to about the idea of being charitable. He said, even from a material calculation, you also are not only you are never bereft, but it also increases what comes to you. That's one of the ways the universe works. So people might think, oh, unless I covet, unless I hoard, unless I hold on, then I won't be safe. But actually, when we're able to let go, we're able to give, we're in that mood of service, everything naturally flows to you. There's goodwill from people. They see that you're doing something noble and they'd like to help. And it's one of the forces of the universe. Those who give get, because it opens this energy of reciprocity. How'd you like the movie? Did you find it touching, heartwarming, or something else?
Yeah, I thought it was great. I also took note. I mean, when he talked about how it didn't feel right to keep the ball and he had to, give it, it's just it's a peculiar thing, right? That like I mean, even a young kid. I mean, and he was a smart kid. You could just hear by how he talked about all of this, but he also just had this feeling. There's like some misalignment in the universe. It's like it's clear that he shouldn't have the ball in that situation. He gave it. And then what's also super interesting is that by giving it, to your point, he grew the pie. So instead of just one ball, collectively, they now got two balls and a gift card. And it also seems, and there's the third point I wanted to make, it also seems that just net, it's better. The person who's like, let's say I have something, I will enjoy it or appreciate it less than like the person I would give it to, if that makes sense. So I think the little girl and her family, they had the gift card. They already had it, so it doesn't mean as much to them than it would to him getting it. And similarly with him giving away the ball. So
Yeah, it's there's so many aspects to such a simple gesture. That's what made me think it's just one little gesture. But now it's on the news and going all over the world because now it's on YouTube and everything else. And what kind of energy is that that's released when there's a gesture of giving kindness? It's metaphysical. It doesn't make sense from a Darwinistic survivalist point of view that he should have kept the ball and sold it on eBay and took the money and stashed it away or something like that. But just see, who knows, he might even get into a better school because he was on TV. The current of that one little gesture could keep expanding unlimitedly. In fact, people who do things like that selflessly, they become famous and history thinks of them well. Whereas others, even though they may amass wealth, if they're miserly, they're known in history, but they're notorious because they're known for their stinginess and contracting the feelings of others through their sense of lording it over and being big controllers instead of being charitable and giving. Any other thoughts? Okay, JM, let's go to the next slide. As we build this case, there's another way in which if we train ourselves or those around us to be entitled, and what's more, to think that I should be served more. If you've ever felt like this little girl looks, like I'm not getting enough service, I didn't get what I wanted. There's a kind of contraction that takes place in the mind and the heart. And this admonition, I think it was in a song or something like it, too much is not enough. No matter what we get, when we don't have that open channel and we don't understand how that principle of giving works in the universe, it doesn't matter how much we accumulate, we'll always feel dissatisfied. I thought her countenance expressed that quite well, don't you? Have you ever felt like that? Like I didn't get what I wanted? Mayank says thumbs up. Manu says yes. JM says yes. So there is an antidote to that, and it's to turn our attitude towards service and to realize that whatever I'm getting anyway, I can't hold on to forever. And to be very clear that no matter how much I accumulate, it's never going to be enough. This is an important principle because let's just say with money, if you get $10, you might think, well, that's not very much. You add a couple more zeros, then you think, well, that's not enough. What if you add more zeros? You get 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, a million, a billion. Is that enough? It's still not enough because there's a way in which I'm always fearful I'm going to lose it, or somebody else might have more than I do, and so forth. This is a phenomenon that is pointed out in the wisdom literature. It doesn't mean you should live in poverty. It doesn't mean you can't have things and manage the energy, which is what money is. But it just means to change your attitude towards it and don't see it as something to hoard, covet, but see it as I'm using this in service. And see that by using it for a higher cause, you grow. This is definitely an effective principle, and it's one that's advocated for in the Bhagavad Gita. Noteworthy is whatever we have now, we're going to lose. It doesn't matter how many plans we make to protect the assets that are temporarily in our holding. We are going to, by the force of time, lose them. So those who are able to use those resources for a higher cause while they have them grow. Charles.
Thank you. Yeah, I just had a quick question regarding this topic. Yeah, I see your point about using wealth for a higher purpose, for service. I think, you know, to your point, when one does get money, no matter, it's never going to be enough. It's always, you get whatever it might be, 10,000, can I add that extra zero? You get the extra zero, can I add the extra zero? And you think, mine, 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 how do it's not enough yet for me, so how do I protect this? And when I get a little bit more, maybe I can give then. Like, it's easy to convince yourself of that. And so, yeah, I was just wondering if you had any insight into that, how to kind of not get trapped with that temptation of thinking, oh, mine, mine, mine. I don't have enough yet. And when I do have enough, even though you might have 10x than you had previously, but now you're comparing yourself to, a different set of criteria.
Yes, absolutely. I could tell you what, again, my friend, colleague from Singapore, who teaches this stuff to rich people, he's rich himself, says about it. And here's how he presents it to others who have lots of money. He says, or those who are starting off, who are obviously going to be successful, or there's a high percentage chance that they're going to be successful because they have the knack for entrepreneurialism and they just know how to make it work. It's in their family. So he tells them that you can notice, first of all, first phenomena is if you say, I'm going to do it later, you never get there. Once I get something, then I'm going to give it. So he says, start with the first dollar you make. If it's 10%, take 10 cents out of the dollar. If it's 50, then take 50 cents out of the dollar. It just becomes your mode of life of giving from that. This is very practical. It's exactly what he says. And he then points out empirically that those who allocate more to giving, even as they're growing, they do better than others. It's counterintuitive because from the Darwinistic survival mode idea, I should hold on to everything and fight off all my enemies to be king of the hill. But the fact is that those who give a portion, in fact, he recommends that they put it in their bylaws. Since in their bylaws, he points out that employees who know they're working for a company that's giving a major portion of what the company earns to higher causes, he says they do better. that is, they're more enthusiastic to work for such a company. We don't work just by getting a certain salary. It's not enough. And similarly, he says those companies do better. They have more longevity. They ultimately net, they make more money. He has the statistics to prove it, and that's what he teaches to people in that circle. So if we can have that clear understanding that that's one of the principles of the universe, it's not some sentimental idea, but it actually is the way the world works. We can refer back again. This is what the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita talks about, people who, in one way or another, they sacrifice for a higher cause. He says, unless you have that principle integrated into your life, you can't be happy. And those who have that principle integrated into their life, they're happy at every level. When they're beginning, in the middle, when they're more mature, when the company they're running or the job they're doing or whatever they're doing, when that principle is ingrained, he says, then they become more successful. And an example that's given oftentimes is that of a tree. When you water the root of the tree, all the leaves and branches naturally flourish. So again, one should do one's due diligence. You should plan your life carefully in all aspects, but you should integrate this giving principle, as when you're able to do that, you'll grow in all aspects of your life because you're watering a root. JM, we have something from
Rajesh.
my friend Rajesh.
Yeah, Rajesh is saying, how do we protect ourselves from getting exploited by some people who look to misuse the selflessness or helpful nature? For example, forcing small kids or handicapped people to do begging.
Well, those people are unscrupulous who do those types of things. We don't advocate for them. And we should also have very stringent laws and observances to make sure that those who are weaker in society and who are vulnerable should be protected. Again, giving doesn't mean to give in to others who are unscrupulous. That's what the penal system is for people who misuse their energy to exploit others. They should be taken to task. So this philosophy is not one of permissiveness for people who are abusing others. And how do we protect ourselves from getting exploited by some people? We should be wary. Just like nowadays, there's so many scams going on that it's worth looking into because they're getting more and more sophisticated through AI. So I was just talking to my wife the other day, and we, just to make ourselves aware that people do have all the logos. They'll call on a phone, and what comes up in the caller ID says Apple or whatever, and then you get on the call, and they're very expert at coercing people into handing over their money and so forth. So how do you protect yourself from those types of people? You have to be vigilant. Vigilant means awake to the possibilities of being exploited. So just because you're a giver doesn't mean you should give to people who are unscrupulous. That's another point of the Bhagavad Gita. You should give to the right places and not be taken in by those who will take advantage of you for their own. Aren't there also recommendations on when, who to give that Krishna talks about? Yes. That's what I was just referring to, and you're probably simultaneously writing that as I was beginning to say it. And so, yes, you should be careful about who you give to. If you give to somebody who's exploiting others for their own purposes, that's charity, but it's not good charity. So you should give your energy, give whatever your service you're doing for the highest purpose that you can find. And beware of thieves and unscrupulous people. Let's see if there's another slide that we have time for, Jim, because we had extensive I think there's a video there, but we don't have time for it. But let's see what else there is for a send-off. Better not show that. Not enough time. I'll just mention that somebody who had called me recently, written to me in distress, and said, give me a prescription for getting out of this moroseness I'm in. This just actually came in today. And this person wrote to me, because I prescribed, do a selfless act and see how you feel. This person wrote, I did a selfless act of service for someone without telling them, and at first it felt great. Then almost immediately after, I felt the need to tell them about it, wanting to see them appreciate what I did. But I stopped myself from saying anything. Later, I was reflecting, and it felt good that I had done something for them, even though I didn't get any recognition from it. Another experiment in giving. And so what was that urge to be recognized, that I want them to know I did this? And what was the feeling of satisfaction that this person got? And I don't know what this person did, because I didn't ask her yet, but there's a dynamic there that's worth looking into. And that's what this talk was about today. Look into it. Does happiness come just from interaction with the senses that are objects? Bhagavad Gita says no. And then does it come from accumulation and holding on? No. We should do our due diligence, but we should factor into our life this idea of giving and selfless service. And that can expand unlimitedly. And when one focuses one's intention on a lifestyle of giving and service, this is what bhakti yoga is. And then you look for the highest cause you can give to. And that's called yajna. We're giving to the root of all existence. And when you do that, then everyone becomes satisfied and your life is abundant, more abundant than anybody could ever imagine. And I'll just give you one last example. Those who are selfless givers are welcomed everywhere they go. People take care of them like their own children, practically. Now, you may have $1 billion and you say, I go everywhere and everybody takes care of me, but it's very different, because those people with resources, they're being taken care of because they're paying people. And that's a huge, huge difference. The feeling is completely different. So a life of giving and learning to serve leads to abundance. Abundance of loving relationships, abundance of appreciation for all the resources that you have, and also unlimited access to more resources. What to speak of this, what was mentioned in that video, even with the simplest gesture of giving, it's heartwarming. Or they said, the reporter said, it's touching. So if you want to live a touching, heartwarming life full of unlimited resource that flows to you, and relationships where people welcome you wherever you go and completely take care of you in all aspects of your life, just shift your focus from being selfish to being selfless and do selfless service. Thank you very much, everyone. Which really reminds me of our friends that live high in the Himalayas. It's yogis, they sit in caves. They're fully absorbed in this self-satisfaction of realizing their own consciousness, but they do come out from those caves into the light, and they forage for roots and fruits, and they'll bring them back into their caves. But from time to time, they see their colleagues on the high peaks of the Himalayas, and just to encourage one another in their inward journey, they say the phrase Hari Bol, which means keep the transcendental vibration going. And this is really true. They raise their hands high in the air, like Wolf is about to do. They say Hari Bol. So I figured we could try it on our way out. Hari Bol.
Hari Bol.
Hari
Bol.
everybody.
Bol.
Rajiv, I hope I see you on Tuesday.
Absolutely.
Okay, fantastic. I've been missing you. Take care, everybody.